Welcome back, everybody. Today I'm going to be showing my workflow for getting a scene in EEVEE to actually look good and hopefully realistic. Sorry for not making a video in a really long time. Life has been crazy busy, moving, school, so much stuff going on. But hopefully in the next few months I'll have some more time to make videos. Moving forward, I am hoping to pivot my channel some. I'd like to focus on some more interesting and useful aspects of 3D, such as today I'm showing off how to use EEVEE better, and in the future maybe I could make a video on quick and easy rigging, lighting, texturing, things like that I've been diving into more recently. For example, as you see on the screen here, this Leopard, I rigged this completely by hand. It's got a nice rigging setup, ears, mouth, eye tracks, eyes can open and shut, eye deformations. Also, I'll put on the screen, I did the nice rig for an eye that had a lot of cool features that I'd like to show off maybe in a future video. Also a hand with moving tendons, which was really interesting to tackle. Anyhow, moving on to this video. I'd like to show off a couple scenes to get us started. Here's this Leopard running in EEVEE. It is real time technically. It's a little laggy for a few reasons I will point out in a minute. As we can see though, this looks beautiful in the viewport. The hair is a little sparse because I haven't turned down for viewport performance, but yeah, it's really nice. It is running slow for a couple of reasons though. This Leopard is very high poly, and it is currently running a makeshift skin simulation, so that is contributing to the lagginess. Also the hair, if I disable that, it'll run a little faster as well. Yeah. This is a backtracking bit, but another thing I might touch on in a future video is proceduralism. I've started a thread on Blender artists. I'll put the link in the description maybe, where I'm going to talk about procedural content generation from environments to objects to whatever I want. So this environment is completely procedural. It's just a plane with a geometry nodes modifier. I scatter things using a method I like to call smart scattering, where specific objects will be scattered in places depending on where other objects are. Also, I have a neat geometry node set up that I can generate roots, which comes in handy. Moving on, we have another scene I'd like to look at. All right, here we are. This one is an example of showing off how EEVEE can render nature quite nicely, as well as volumetrics. So you'll see I have this nice nature scene set up. You've got a log. There should actually be moss on this log, but I have it turned off for viewport display because with like more than 1 million instances, it gets a little laggy. I'll throw up the image on the screen though, so you can see it. I just have one point light lighting this scene. The world is completely dark, it's turned off. We can see that this actually looks really nice. If I go on my Blender artist topic, I have a comparison. So this is the cycles version on the left, and then on the right you see the same render but in EEVEE. They're actually quite similar. There are some noticeable differences that you can see, such as the translucency. It doesn't quite compare. EEVEE is not a perfect render engine. It is not realistic. All I do is just try to approximate realism and trick the eye into thinking it's realistic. So it doesn't have the same capabilities as cycles. But as you can see, it's pretty close. There are some noticeable differences, but they're pretty small. Also here on the left we have the cycles version, and on the right we have the EEVEE version. The lighting is different because this was lit with the sky texture in Blender in the Cycles version, and that does not work in the EEVEE at all, which is regrettable, but hopefully in the future it'll be supported. So the lighting is of course different, but overall the render quality is very similar. This was a very exciting project for me to make because it really proved to me that EEVEE is completely capable of making amazing scenes. Oh yeah, this is the moss that I was talking about earlier. I guess I won't put that on the screen, but yeah, there should be moss there. As we can see though, this runs in real time really nicely. Beautiful render. Let me see. Yeah, I do have the compositor on, just increasing the contrast a bit, adding some glare, a bit of film grain, lazy film grain. Yeah, it looks nice. So, last example. Here we are. This is just showing off how nice EEVEE's lighting is, or how nice it can be, and its rendering. So, as we see, we got some different objects, different colors. Subsurface scattering shown off on this monkey. It looks quite nice. As we can see through the ear, the light is filtering through pretty well. It's not perfect, especially compared to Cycles. It doesn't hold up quite as well, but it does a pretty good approximation. Here we have glass accurately using screen space reflection. This isn't a completely perfect way to calculate refraction though, or reflection, because let's see, as we can see, as the sphere goes out of sight behind here, this reflection and refraction just turns black. That is because this sphere is no longer on our screen, and this runs off of a screen space system. So basically, anything that we see on our screen will be refracted or reflected. Anything that we don't see will not be. Here we have a metal ball. This is running on screen space reflections as well. As we can see, there is a cube here, and this is the cube in the reflection, but this back face of the cube is completely missing. Again, that is because of the screen space reflection. The back face of the cube is not on our screen at the moment. Also, we can see the sphere is disappearing in the reflection, whereas in this reflection, the sphere is still there. That is because this is using a reflection cube map, which basically lets us bake reflections in a certain area. So if I delete the lighting cache, you'll see those nice reflections go away. And when I bake the cube map again, we have nice reflections here. Generally, I steer away from using baked lighting or reflections. I just prefer to have everything real time and update right in front of me when I move things around. Let's see. Also, we have cloth. This is actually like really nice because I haven't shaded much cloth in EEVEE before. So this was a nice little test to do. We can see nice sheen around the edges, good bump, nice, overall just nice looking cloth. A little low quality when you zoom in, but that's just because of the texture I was using. Also, we see that in EEVEE generally, let's see, if I disable the world, we'll see that there's no bounce light, which is a big issue. There's no global illumination. When making realistic renders, you'd really want global illumination in your scene. Thankfully, in EEVEE, there are ways to fake global illumination. Of course, you can use the screen space global illumination build of EEVEE. I have a video that I will link in the description that goes over what it is, how to use it, how to download it. Also, you can use baked lighting, which will give you bounce light. But when working in real time, that's a little annoying. You have to keep rebaking it when you edit your scene. It's not my favorite way to do it. What I do like to do, there are two things that can contribute to tricking your eye into thinking that there's bounce light. The first one is screen space reflections. As you can see, without it on, this is just a completely black face of the cube. When I turn it on, we see a bit of reflection. This is not bounce light, but it tricks your eye a little bit into thinking that there's bounce light because the light is bouncing on this green monkey, and then we're seeing it looking like it's bounced from the monkey to the cube. That's not what's actually happening. What's actually happening is the cube is reflecting the monkey. But it helps to trick your eye a little bit. Just to make this effect work though, you'll need to turn up the maximum roughness for screen space reflections to 1. If it's too low, it will basically, if your shader has a roughness over the maximum, it won't reflect anything. So I like to keep that at 1 so that every object will have this little effect. Okay, the second way to fake bounce light, and this generally works best in outdoor scenes, is by adding a little bit of extra light in your world. So for this, let me show you my shader quickly. It's pretty simple. Originally I was using an HDR, but I'm actually just using the sky texture here. So all this does is basically, this shader is what will affect the objects. And this background shader is what the camera will see, which is why we see this nice background instead of this. So what this is, and why I have this turned down so far, is to kind of approximate or fake the effect that there's indirect lighting in this scene. Maybe I should turn that down even a little farther for it to be a little more accurate. And yeah, as you can see, the shadows are no longer completely black. And it looks a little more realistic. All right, let me see what I have next on the plan. Okay, next up, we're talking about shadows. So by default in EEVEE, let me reset this to default. I had this set up so it'll look nice. By default, it will look so-so. So as you can see, these shadows, they look low quality. They don't look perfectly right. It looks a little wonky. How can we fix that? The first thing we can do to deal with these low quality, weird, blurry edges, under the shadows panel in the render properties, we can just change the cascade size. If you bring that up to the highest, you can go 4096, you'll see the shadows get a lot sharper. I don't always recommend doing this though. Some scenes I like to keep it lower because it does take more performance away from you when you do that. For example, in the scene with the Leopard, it was already low performance, so I left it at 1024. It's completely up to you of what you set this on. You can also do in between 2048. You can even do really low. Like, these shadows look terrible, but maybe that fits your scene. Also for toon shading, I'd like to note, having your cascade size set to 4096 makes it a lot easier. So you have consistent shadows across everything. The second thing, this under your light source, whatever that is. For this scene, I just have a sun lamp. Under the shadow panel, if you enable contact shadows, let me reset this to the default. And when you enable contact shadows, you'll immediately see a difference. So let's see on the monkey here, I enable it, and we have this shadow popping up. Now, this can lead to some issues though, because as we see under the monkey's ear, under this cloth, there's just a shadow floating in space. That's not how real life works, you know? So if we turn up the distance, we see that the contact shadows get calculated for a farther distance, right? So for this scene, I found 0.5 to work pretty well, and now we have much better shadows. Okay, the third thing, I forgot to mention this, that will help to contribute to shadows, is ambient occlusion. I cannot stress how important this is, especially in EEVEE. Just enabling this setting by default, you'll see a little difference. Let's, for example, under this monkey. we'll see there is a slight change, but not a lot. Where this becomes more useful for faking shadows is when we bring the factor up. This will basically make it a more intense effect. So 2, 3. Also, by the way, this is a slider, but you can type in values that are larger than the slider range. So for this scene, I had 10. We're seeing it a little bit more, but it's still kind of small. So when we bring up the distance, I had it at about 0.8. We see that's getting a lot darker. This will sort of help fake the idea of bounce light and less light in areas with more occlusion, right? So we can see it looks a lot more defined and has better depth when we enable ambient occlusion. Okay, I'll touch on glass quickly. For this glass shader, we see if I disable screen space reflection, it just goes completely blank. The reflection is what allows it to have reflection, just as like these metal balls, but the refraction is what allows it to actually refract. So when I disable screen space refraction, it goes completely dark as well. Enable it again, it turns back on. All you have to do to actually use this setting on a glass shader is on your shader, when you have transmission set to 1, whatever your roughness is, under the material settings, just make sure to enable screen space refraction on your material. Don't mess with the blending modes. For example, if I set my blending mode to alpha blend, this looks messed up and strange. We can see the back through the front. It's just messy. We just leave it at opaque and it'll work perfectly fine. Okay, next up, I would like to demo volume rendering. So let me open that file up quickly. Okay, here we are in the scene with the volume. As we see, this looks terrible. I have set up a mandel bulb. Shout out to someone that I will put their channel in the description. I forgot their channel name. They're really helpful. They have a nice video on how to create a mandel bulb in Blender. Something that I probably could not figure out the math to do. But with their help, I created this. We can see this looks terrible. But yeah, let's learn how to make it good. First up, enabling these settings like screen space reflections, ambient occlusion, that won't help us in this case because this is a volume object. So under the volumetrics panel, the first thing we can do is bring the tile size down. The smaller the tile size, the higher resolution the volume will be. The second thing we can do is enable volumetric shadows. This means that the volume will actually cast shadows on itself. This looks pretty cool. Let me bring the lighting up a bit. And yeah, we see something happening. There we go. Now we can see this easier. It still looks a little funny, and there's a lot of flickering when we move our camera around. So how do we fix that? Something interesting that I recently learned is that as you bring the end distance for volumetric clipping down, bring it closer to the camera, it'll make the volumes basically higher quality. Because from my understanding, it's spreading the same amount of resolution over a smaller space, which makes it appear higher quality. So if I bring this end distance, let's say I bring it down to 5 meters. Okay, that was a little too much because now we can't see our volume. Let's try 10. Yeah, there we go. Look at this. This looks so much better. It's beautiful. Nice lighting, nice shadows. Much higher quality, less flickering. This is scene dependent, by the way. Depending on how far away volumes are from your camera, this strategy won't help too much. But for rendering close-up volume objects or like God rays near the camera, this is a really helpful way to do that. Also, the higher your samples are, the more defined this volume will be. That's pretty obvious though. All right, next up, I'm going to discuss hair. Back in the leopard scene, we have our leopard. Currently, he does not have eyes. Just don't worry about that. This is a good example, though, of how I get the fake bounce light or global illumination with an HDRI image. This is just one of the default built-in HDRI images with Blender. If you don't know how to open those into your scene as an actual world texture, let me show you quickly. You'll go into your, wherever you have Blender installed. For me, it's my C drive, and you'll go into Program Files, Blender Foundation. For me, I'll choose Blender 3.6. It doesn't really matter. They will all have, or anything after 2.8 will have the same studio light setups. Then you'll go under, for me, 3.6. For you, whatever Blender version you have. Data files, studio lights, world, and then these are the HDRIs that it has for you in Material Preview, and this will let you open them and use them in your actual render. Okay, hair. On this model, I used the old Blender hair system because this is a rigged model, and currently the Geometry Node's hair system does not deform. So I had to take a blast in the past and use this old system. As you can see, I have a lot of children. In the viewport, I turned most of them off, so to keep I turned most of them off to keep performance high. If I turn them up to the render amount, there we go. We have hair. This looks decent, right? To get hair to look good in EEVEE, follow the same steps you would use in cycles. As far as grooming goes. And then one of the big things that helped my hair look good in this scene was ambient occlusion. Also, in my opinion at least, under curves in your render settings, I recommend changing it to strip, because as you can see, strand looks really wrong. There's this big dark spot here. It just doesn't work right. Changing it to strip, much more even lighting, much better. Just make sure that you change the hair shape in your hair settings, because by default it is set to this, which looks really weird. Okay, that's hair. Let's see what else we got. Last one. I believe at least last one, if I've been keeping track properly. This scene is a good example of it. Viewport Compositing. This will save your butt so much when working with EEVEE. Not only is it nice to preview your compositing in real time, but it also is a handy way to edit, especially your shadows, and also cover up your lazy work. So if I disable the Viewport Compositor, you'll see this looks kind of flatter, not very good. And when I enable it, it looks much richer, the shadows look better, etc. So all I did is some color correction, some bloom, a little bit of lens distortion or dispersion, but I see so many people go overboard with this. And if you like it as a stylistic choice, then okay. But if you're going for realism, this value has to be super low. Like on this scene, I would even say this is too high. In the corner, you can see a bit too much of it. So I'm gonna bring that down to even lower. Then I use some curves. This just helps with the shadows a little bit, makes them seem a little more rich. And then finally, a bit of lazy film grain, and then a slight blur to help with a little less of the sharp look you get from a render. Of course, when doing actual compositing in, let's say, Resolve, I would have some more to it than this, but this just helps me preview in the render and get the shadows looking a little nicer. Let's see, what can I show off in this? From what we've talked about, I can show off some stuff in this scene. So, first up, this is the material preview. This looks terrible, especially the vegetation, but also the leopard does not, it's just not doing it. When we go rendered, much better. We see the sun is giving off all the light in the scene almost, and then the world with the secondary extra faked light, again, a very low strength, and then this other world you see is just the background that you see in the render. We've got ambient occlusion. This scene is not too noticeable, but if I go ahead and open up the nature scene I had earlier, we'll see that it's actually a pretty noticeable change. Also, screen space reflection plays a big deal in this scene to make it look better. So, as we see, we have come back. We have ambient occlusion. Okay, there we go. Without any ambient occlusion, it looks a little funny. With the ambient occlusion, it helps it feel a little more full of depth. Screen space reflections also helps the vegetation reflect a bit more light, reflect each other a bit. It makes it feel a bit more cohesive. Also, this is a good example of the volume clipping helping the quality of the volume. So if I set this to 100, as the default scene has it in Blender, you'll see this looks terrible. What is this volume doing here? The light is blocked by this tree. It should not be showing up there. Bring it down to 7 as I had it. Beautiful. Amazing God rays. All right, thank you for sticking with me through this video. Sorry it's a little scuffed. I still have not gotten a better microphone as I haven't been making any videos recently. So I'm still recording it on my phone. It's a little rough, but hopefully it's good enough. You know, I'm just here to impart my knowledge on all my ready viewers and hope that you guys make something cool out of it. So yeah, let me know if there are any videos you'd like to see from me in the future. I'm really interested in rigging. I've been diving into that some more recently, trying to get good results with the least amount of work. I feel like if I do make more videos soon, that would probably be the next one. So yeah, thanks for watching. Let me know what's up next, and see you next time.